Trump suggests this week that Iran's leadership is divided. Is he right? What does a fractured government in Tehran mean for the negotiation? Does it make it more or less likely that we will see a resumption of fighting? Trump caught everyone by surprise by extending the Iran ceasefire, and he cited fractured leadership in Iran for his decision. And there's been a lot of talk about what does that mean. In fact, there's been a lot of speculation about a potential, fracturing, or for that matter, coup in Iran that might have hardened the bargaining position of the Iranian leadership. But joining me, to talk about this very, very important subject today is Potkin Azarmehr. Potkin is a British investigative journalist born in Iran and a senior fellow at Investigative Project on Terrorism. He's also a former producer at the Persian-speaking TV station with the largest Iranian viewers. I've known Potkin for a long time. I have a lot of respect for him, and he just published a major article on this issue exactly about fractured leadership in Iran and what does that mean. So Potkin, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you, David. It's always a pleasure to speak to you and to benefit from your vast insight and intellect.
Last Friday, when Iran suddenly closed the Strait of Hormuz, I sort of felt, that something changed. It felt like it was a hardening of Iran's negotiating position, and it felt pretty sudden. I mean, I was thinking at the time, was like, wow, did something actually happen? Especially given the following day, you had Galibov, in a media interview talking about, loving the Supreme Leader, a guy who's supposed to be, been incapacitated, in a coma, whatever you have. I was wondering, if this guy came out of the coma or whatever happened. So you wrote an article about this fractured leadership. Talk us through that. I mean, what's the evidence and what does that actually mean for the current conflict?
Okay, it's the article is actually discussing a conjecture. I mean, just like a scientific theory, when you have a phenomena and you come up with a theory to explain things and you do experiments, and so long as the theory answers the experiments, testifies the experiments, then the theory holds true. But you only need one experiment that goes against the theory, and then the entire theory is falling apart. Yeah. So again, here it's not that we got any insider information as such, but it's a conjecture because there have been some anomalies that it's hard to explain. And if I may go through them, for example, so we have not seen the new Supreme Leader. Not only we haven't seen him, we haven't had a video recording from him. We haven't had an audio recording from him. We haven't even had a handwritten note from him. I mean, that must be strange. I mean, 28th of February, the previous Supreme Leader of Iran is killed. Yeah. So we're now talking more than a month, nearly 2 months, and not a single sign to suggest or to prove that he's alive. And yet the Revolutionary Guards, it's saying, yeah, these are all the orders of the Supreme Leader, it's all coming from him. And that's, and we don't know how this chain of command is operating. And the things that can't be explained, there's several things that can't be explained. First of all, in the Islamic Republic Constitution, there are defined steps and procedure for appointing the new Supreme Leader. So you have the Assembly of the Experts, and they sit down and they appoint and they vote for the new leader. Okay, because of the emergency conditions, because of the war, we don't expect to have a televised version of what went on in that meeting of the Assembly of Experts. But there's no information from it. We don't even know how many people voted for Mojtaba, how many voted against Mojtaba. And also, if the Supreme Leader is incapacitated, if he's ill, or if he doesn't have his mental faculties, if he's in a coma, whatever, if he's not in a position to appear and to lead the country, again, there are defined procedures that have to be followed, and none of that has been followed. So immediately we come to the conclusion that, well, something is happening. The Constitution is not being applied. And then there are other things that can't be explained. Khamenei, Ali Khamenei, the previous Supreme Leader, he had 4 sons. Mojtaba wasn't his only son. Mojtaba was, I think, his second or third son. So he had his sons Mustafa, Mojtaba, Maysam, and Masood. We haven't heard from any of the other brothers either. And one of the brothers, Masood, was related to Kamal Kharazi through his wife. Kamal Kharazi was the former Iranian foreign minister and one of the sort of like inner circles of the regime. Him and his wife were killed. Now, if Masood is related to Kamal Kharazi's wife and they're killed, you expect some sort of statement, some sort of condolence, some sort of like expression of feelings, about his wife's family members. Nothing. We have not heard. I mean, I can understand, for example, that the Mujtaba, if he's the new supreme leader, he can't appear in the public. But what about the other brothers? Are they under threat as well? I mean, why have we not had an audio file from them or a video file from them? And also, the supreme leader must have had a will. Part of that will must have been discussing the succession. Why isn't anyone reading out his will? So all this has prompted this another contact that I know who was a graduate of Imam Sadiq University. Now, this university was specifically created after the revolution to train the regime officials. He's a graduate of that university, but he left Iran. He didn't like the system. He didn't want to have any parts with it. But he has a better understanding of the inner structures of the system and the people there. And it was something that we discussed first. He sort of like discussed this conjecture, and to explain all these things that are the anomalies, his conjecture suggests that the military, the IRGC, has actually pushed the clergy aside, because in 1979, when the Islamic Revolution succeeded to overthrow the secular monarchy in Iran and establish the Islamic Republic, this was specifically the rule by the Shia clergy. And the supreme leader, who was the supreme jurisprudence, who was the absolute ruler, and the military, the IRGC, which its correct name is actually the Guardians of the Islamic Revolution. There's no Iran in it. They're not tasked with defending the Iranian borders. They are tasked with guarding and protecting the Islamic Revolution and the clerics. That's why they were created. But it looks like they're now in a position where they feel strong enough, saying, like, well, why should we sort of like, be under these aged clerics? We're strong enough to rule ourselves. And it seems like they've pushed them aside. So the conjecture is that the military have now got into a position where they feel powerful enough to think, why do we wait for the clergy? Why do we take orders from the clergy? And they've pushed aside the clergy, and there is no Mujtaba. And they're just using that to make sure that for now, the system holds together. And that not only resonates with the questions that have been unanswered since the death of Khamenei, it also resonates with previous historic examples in Iran. Something interesting that happened after I published the article was, Jalili is one of the factions in Iran. Yeah, he's tried to run for presidency several times, and you could describe his faction as a pro-cleric, very religious, hardline faction, and his supporters, his X account of supporters, interestingly, posted something yesterday, which I will read the translation. It says, "We'll be very direct. If all these instructions are from the leader, please can the leadership record a voice or video and issue his orders directly. That way, we too will find out what is going on and obey. If this does not happen, then 100% the officials have taken part in a fitna," and fitna means like an internal civil strife within an Islamic caliphate, Islamic society, Islamic rule. And all his statements, and they've hashtagged fitna, and then it continues, and all his statements have been written by the man carrying the coup, hashtag coup. So specifically, it's talking about insurgency within the regime, and a coup. That post was very quickly removed. Not only that post was removed, the entire account seems to have come down now, right? And then I saw one of the IRGC affiliated Telegram channels then post something against the Jalili faction. The post on the Telegram channel accused the Jalili faction of their previous track record in attacks against General Bagheri, who was one of the top ranking, he was the head of the combined armed forces who was killed in the 12-day war. And they said they did the same with Larijani, and today they are targeting Ghalibaf. Why is it that whoever becomes a target of their attack is then killed by Israel? So there's definitely some sort of visible differences between Jalili faction and these new military bloc that is developed, and we can see in public. So and as I said, if you think about the Jalili faction as being a very pro-clerical faction, it sort of like adds feathers to the arrow for the conjecture that it looks like the military have come to a point where the thing, we're so strong, we don't need to work for the clergy. We can push aside the clergy. We can act as if we're acting in the name of the supreme leader at the moment, but you know, it's time for us to rule the country.
Even if the supreme leader were to suddenly appear on TV or whatnot, and so on and so forth, you know, there's still the possibility that he's become a puppet.
Yes.
You know, under an IRGC ruled government, right?
Yes.
I mean, so there is no, I mean, that's not necessarily a contradiction, actually.
Yes.
And then it also is very possible. So, I mean, by the way, it's not just Iranian history. I mean, in Chinese history, I mean, it happened a lot. Like the military takes over, basically appoint someone, one of the emperor's sons that was weak, use him as a puppet to justify the rule. He's the front man, but the power is being wielded from behind by the military. So, I mean, I think that's a very common thing that it wouldn't surprise me something like this happened. I mean, especially given the fact that, you know, if you think about this, like, you know, the Iranian military the IRGC must be feeling pretty good about itself. I mean, right? I mean, after all, they kept, you know, they have managed to resist, you know, the combined military, you know, might of the United States and Israel. So from that point of view, you got to believe that in a room, their voice has gotten much louder, and they're probably feeling more confident. There's no reason for them not to want to call the shot, so to speak. Which, by the way, you know, essentially raises the question about the role of Ghalibaf. I'm still struggling to understand, like, why this guy? Like, for one thing, if he were that powerful, wouldn't he have been killed by the Israelis, like, you know, at the start of the war, like everybody else? I mean, especially given his connection, the scandals involving him and his family, his son seeking, you know, whatever permanent residency in Canada. Both of his daughters basically own apartments in Turkey. You know, like, you know, the famous shopping trips that his family went to after the birth of his first grandson, and so on and so forth. I mean, this guy, you know, is definitely corrupt, right? I might even have thought that, you know, given his background, the fact he's still alive, is it possible that he's like in his, you know, a Mossad, basically undercover, you know, basically in Iran. So from that point of view, like, I mean, clearly, if Trump was under an impression that the negotiation was going so well, clearly he got the impression from somebody. I mean, and I can only assume that perhaps, you know, Ghalibaf was about to, whatever, sell the farm. Who does Ghalibaf represent? What is his base? And how does he fit into the whole picture?
Okay, first of all, I'll concord with everything that you just said. My only sort of caveat is that, actually, before I talk about the caveat, another thing which supports this conjecture is that there are certain, if you like, the IRGC, like every other Iranian entity, are circles of power that are always competing with each other, and you need a head honcho at the top to make sure that they don't destroy each other, to make sure that none of them become too powerful. Yeah. And similarly, in the IRGC, you have these like competing circles of power, and there are certain circles of power that have remained intact after all these assassinations, after all these killings. Yeah. So that's another thing that with the conjecture. The caveat about Ghalibaf is Ghalibaf, as you say, has remained alive, and he seems to be the front face of this outfit that has managed to survive. But I don't think he's the main man. I think he's the front man. My focus is on the two others behind him, which can either be Zolgad, who's the head of the Supreme National Security Council, or on Vahidi, who's the Minister of Defense. And which one is the more powerful? I'm not sure. My suspicion or my tendency is more towards Zolgad. But we mustn't underestimate Ghalibaf in the sense that he was very close with Qasem Soleimani, the previous leader of the Quds Force. He's close friends with Rouhani, the leader of the Quds Force now. He's been a war veteran ever since he was in his teens, really. So he has a lot of connections and roots within the IRGC, and is also out of them, he is someone who's had some sort of technocrat experience in the sense that he's been the head of the police force, he's been the mayor of Tehran, and he's had sort of like project management hands-on experience. Not saying that he was successful or he was a good project manager, but he has these things. So I think he's a good sort of like shop window dressing, front man. But I think the real power is not him. I think my focus is more on Zolgad, the head of the Supreme National Security Council, and also the fact that again he's someone who's been behind the scenes more or less. And there are people within the Islamic Republic that have had a lot of sort of press coverage. They've been in the in the front line, in the public eye. The real power is normally with the people that are behind the scene and don't appear that much. Zolgad is one of those.
On one hand, you could have the moderates and the IRGC, and the IRGC decided to put its foot down, and this is the reason why all of a sudden the whole negotiation broke down. That's one possibility, which is what you're suggesting. There's also another possibility, of course, is that all along Iran looked upon this ceasefire as nothing more than simply buying time for them to prepare for the real war ahead, right? I mean, because, you would have thought that after 6 weeks, perhaps, maybe even the IRGC didn't think that they were going to last as long as they did. But the fact is that they did. And it was time for regrouping, resupplying and resetting. And they needed a couple of weeks to actually put themselves in a position to really, especially given that the Iranians always knew the only way they could win this war is by turning into a war of attrition, because they believe that the Americans haven't got the stamina. If they can drag this out, they knew that Trump would run into trouble. So from that point of view, you could argue, agreeing, they might have told Trump whatever he wanted to hear in order to buy themselves 2 more weeks. And meanwhile, they're running out the clock because they know Trump's basically 60 days was up very soon. So all this, you could also argue. I mean, the fact that actually, the Iranians said, whatever was yesterday, that they've got some surprises, for Trump, new cards in the battlefield. That's also consistent with the idea that perhaps that they needed 2 weeks to actually get ready for something else. Maybe, who knows? I mean, new weapons or incorporating, new Chinese, basically, air defense, whatever that may be. The point here is that, is that another possibility but obviously it's going to end up in the same outcome in the sense that there is not going to be a compromise. There's not going to be a deal anytime soon. But do you think that there's anything to be said about simply that these guys just buying time and that everything else they're doing is a bit of a charade? Just like, Trump has been engaging in a charade of his own sort.
Yeah, something that was often publicly discussed after the 12-day war was that they kept saying that they agreed to the ceasefire too soon. They were saying that if they'd gone along with the war for longer, even if it was just like 1 or 2 missiles being fired at Israel, but it went on for say 3-4 months, the impact on the Israelis would be a lot greater because they would have to go to shelters every night, even if it's just 1 or 2 missiles being fired. And they only needed 1 missile or the shrapnels of a missile to fall something and cause major damage. So They really thought they'd made the mistake in the 12-day war. They were a bit shocked by the 12-day war to begin with, and they agreed to the ceasefire, and then they sort of like regretted it, thinking that they should have, as you said, extended this into a war of attrition and not agreed so soon. And then since the 12-day war, they've been preparing, they've been expecting. This time it wasn't that much of a surprise for them. It was like, you could see all this sort of like military transfer, military build up in the region. So it was something they were preparing with, and they were sort of like perfecting the art of asymmetric warfare. Ever since I've known this regime, they are the masters of brinksmanship. I mean, with every crisis, and they absolutely love crisis. They thrive on crisis. Their weakest time is their management during peacetime. That's when they fall apart. But they absolutely love conflict, war, crisis. This is their playing field, and they play the brinksmanship to the best of their ability. They go right to the edge, absolutely to the edge. And right now, what's the situation that we're in? We've got both sides. We've got time clicking against both sides. So Iran, if the naval blockade is successful, and let's also say this, that no naval blockade is ever complete. I mean, the sea is a very big thing. It's always very difficult to have a complete naval blockade. I think historians can confirm that better than me. But the if the naval blockade is stringent and is tight, and Iran can't export any oil, they only have limited capacity for the storage of the oil. And I think from what the figures that I've got at the moment, they're almost 60% full. If they can't export any more oil, they can't store the oil anywhere. If they can't store the oil, that means they can't extract from many of the oil wells. And most of these oil wells, if you stop extracting from them, they'll be shut down permanently. You will not be able to extract oil from them. And that this is the major revenue for Iran. Iran is an oil-based economy. Imagine if the oil wells shut down. So this is a serious time clicking against the regime. At the same time, they know that time is clicking against Trump as well, because of the 60 days limit that he's got. Is it next Tuesday that his time is up before he's got to get the Congress approval? And then you've got the impact on the energy markets, on the global economy, the pressure, the international pressure that's building up. So they are playing brinksmanship, going right to the edge, and it's just a question of who will kneel first. It's like a chicken game when we were kids, when we used to like throw knives, and then it depends like who got scared first and sort of like gave up. And this is exactly what it is. So far in the last 47 years, they've been quite successful in playing this brinksmanship. But the point about brinksmanship is that you only have to make one mistake only one time, and it's a catastrophe.
If the blockade was such a great idea, why didn't the Americans start with that? you know, even before Iran basically closed down the Strait of Hormuz, the Americans said, well, now we're going to stop your export of oil altogether by essentially, they didn't do that.
No,
You know,
that makes sense, because it's easier to implement the naval blockade if the military might of the other side is weaker than before. So they wanted to weaken the military power of the regime, so they have less missiles, they have less missile launchers, they have no navy left. The bombing of the petrochemicals. Let's not forget that is also a big factor. I mean, that is a massive, massive impact on Iran's economy. From my understanding, is that something like 1 million people are going to become unemployed from all these damage to the petrochemicals, and the impact it's going to have on Iran's revenue.
how long can Iran resist this? Like in a way that obviously this is going to impoverish the Iranian society. People are going to lose their jobs and so on and so forth. And maybe I don't know what the Americans, whether they're doing this. Maybe they're also blocking, imports of other things such as everyday necessity and so on and so forth. But this is where I want to ask you because you know what is the mood in Iran right now? I mean, do you have any inkling about, the livelihood of the ordinary people right now? I mean, are people starving or are there stuff in the store when they go in? I mean, because I mean, obviously at the end of the day, when people have nothing left to lose, then they might rise up against the regime, even if it means death. Now, the question is that have we gotten to that point that people are so desperate that the Americans, if they can somehow impose a blockade, they're going to turn the people against the regime?
Well, the people are already against the regime. The trouble is that when you talk about like people rising against the regime, what people normally forget is that the main fanatical support for the regime isn't even amongst the 10% supporters of them inside Iran. The main fanatical support for the regime is actually outside Iran from the Shia minorities that are living in these Sunni majority countries that are persecuted, like the say, for example, the 70 million Shia Pakistanis. And they're like, living in a Sunni country. They're often subject of attacks by Sunni extremists. Their mosques are attacked. There've been massacres of Shias in Pakistan. They look at Iran as their savior, as their sort of like strong anchor that they can rely on in times of need. The same goes with the Shias in Afghanistan. The same goes with Shias in Bahrain. The Shias in Iraq, they're not a persecuted minority anymore, but they were under Saddam, and they remember Iran as being their savior. And in terms of and the regime can always rely on these forces to implement the crackdown against protesters. And in terms of brutality and savagery, these fanatic supporters of the regime that are coming from outside Iran, they really can't be matched. And when you've got a strong military and paramilitary and proxy groups, that are extreme in their brutality and everything, really the only way that people can succeed is either if the entire Iran comes on the streets, 80 million people come on the street in one go. I don't know how you're going to organize this, but if it's possible, or if you're going to have a serious defection from the military. Now, we haven't seen a serious defection from the military. We haven't seen a sizable deflection from it. Maybe one or two people who've sort of like managed to speak out against the regime, and they've come out of Iran, or maybe they've been arrested. But there hasn't been a sizable defection within the ranks of the military in Iran. I mean, you have the crown prince who comes and stands in front of a teleprompter, and then he asks the Iranian military to join the people, to join the revolution against the regime. Put yourself as one of those in the military. If you even were against the regime and you wanted to do something, what exactly are you supposed to do? How are you actually going to come out to join this revolution? I mean, the only thing that I can think of is maybe if a part of Iran is, quotes, liberated, and there is some sort of like a resistance army or military there, and then maybe they can then, go to that place to join, like in Syria, for example, where the what was it called, the Free Syrian Army that was formed. And then, if you were part of Assad's army and you didn't want to be in it, you could then somehow defect and join that army in one part of Syria where they were based. That's not a possibility in Iran at the moment. And how many more times should people come out with empty hands and get slaughtered? It's a huge cost. Whole families have been destroyed in these recent uprisings that we've had. Either the entire kids in a family, or the parents, or the entire families that have been destroyed, or people who've got their kids and their relatives in prisons for many years, sort of thing. It's hard. It's not. It's easy to sit that outside Iran and say to people, oh, they should come on the streets and they've got nothing to lose and everything. It really is a very risky venture to oppose the this regime.
Oil oil price was trading about $120 a barrel, Brent,
Mm.
when Iran was letting through about 40 tankers a week. If Iran now says, you know what, because the US won't allow any basically ships to arrive or take off from the Iranian ports, we're now going to make sure that nobody gets through the Strait of Hormuz. If we go from 40 to zero, I mean, oil price could easily go to like 140, $150 a barrel, which will sink the US economy, will tank the US stock market. What I'm saying to you is it seems to me, now, sure, you can let the Chinese tankers through because, I mean, the Chinese are paying for everything, you're a supporter and that kind of thing. But Iran could literally put his foot down and say, you know what? The US is now, you should blame the US for the seizing of all essentially traffic in and out of Strait of Hormuz. And then, and that will be a very powerful leverage that Iran has over the US, at least in terms of the implication for US markets, which has always been basically a soft spot for Trump. So wouldn't they do that first before they sort of give in to the US?
I don't think they can actually physically close the Straits of Hormuz because even when the price of oil went up to $120, from what I understand, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, the Straits of Hormuz was not physically closed, was it? It was basically the insurance and the shipping, they were finding it too risky to move. Closing it physically is not an easy task. And let's not forget that most of the Iranian Navy has been annihilated. So I'm not sure if it's within their capability to do that.
I personally think it is, only because we saw this with the Houthis. If you remember, you don't even need, in order to close the Strait of Hormuz, even though it's 25 kilometers wide, at the narrowest point, the point here is that the usable sea lane is only between 1 to 2 kilometers, which means if you just hit it, every 10 minutes with like regular conventional artillery, forget about using drones and whatever, like no shit want to basically go through. And certainly, the US is not prepared to deploy any naval vessels because the last thing they want to do is to essentially sit there, be the, sitting ducks, especially naval vessels, to be very large. They're going to be easy to hit. These tankers are big. You don't even have to aim that precisely to hit one of these. So, and then, we know that Iran still have a few thousand, speedboats, as you know. I mean, these are actually the most dangerous thing
Yeah.
vis-a-vis larger ships because it's difficult to actually see them. And, they look like fishing boats and they're very, very fast. And then if they come at you 10, 20 at the same time, it's not that easy. So my point here is that I personally think that that's what Iran will do first, actually. And maybe that's what they're preparing for. But at the same time, I also understand that they may not want to give Trump an excuse to attack Iran until his 60 days run out. So
Oh,
obviously, from the Iranian perspective, the best thing can happen is that U.S. Congress steps in and stops the war, and then Trump is completely screwed, rather than they're having to do it themselves. So I think from that point of view, like Iran doesn't have a strong incentive to negotiate, and but they don't at the same time want to completely provoke Trump. They want to keep this one little glimpse of hope for him in the hope that that he'll just essentially get to next Tuesday without basically wavering, without making a decision, and then Iran is home free, so to speak. I mean, that's what I would do. Now, which then begs the question about what is Trump going to do? Because my view is very simple, which is that, Trump, and people talk about the midterm election as though that this is even a consideration for Trump right now. Because the reality is that, Trump knows full well that the midterm election has already been lost. In 20 out of the last 22 US midterm elections, the president's party lost seats in the House of Representatives. Just yesterday, we had a basically a vote about the redistricting in Virginia that will hand by itself 4 seats to the to the Democrats, and the Republicans right now only have a 3-seat majority. And I'm sure if I know this, Trump knows it extremely well, which is that the Republicans are going to get devastated, okay, in the midterm election. So from that point of view, he's already a lame duck. And if you look at the last 50 years, when a president becomes a lame duck, his focus shifts away from domestic policies, domestic politics, to foreign policy and his legacy. And it
mhm.
seems to me there is nothing more important to Donald Trump in terms of his legacy than Iran, right? Everything that he's done about Iran since his first term would have mean nothing if he were to walk away now. And it would be even worse if he ends the war because Congress decides to basically hold him back. Because then he's going to become the laughing stock of the world. People are going to say, wow, this was a total failure, that in the end, that Congress had to basically pull back, okay, Trump, and so from that point of view, I personally think, that Trump still has a very strong incentive to basically hit Iran hard if the talk breaks down. And then I think, given that he's only got whatever 6 days left, he might give Iran a couple of more days. And on Friday, after the market closes, he might just decide that's it. I'm going to destroy all their bridges and all their power plants, just as he threatened. At least, at least just to show that he's done something. Because otherwise, he's going to go. The historians are going to be very unkind about him in the history book, and I think his legacy is going to be one of total ineffectualness and loss of U.S. hegemony. In fact, I was struck by the fact that, the South China Morning Post this morning ran an article, in fact, making the case that if Trump were to tackle, that this will cost the U.S. hegemony and that this is going to benefit China. So the U.S., if the Chinese are thinking this thing out loud, I cannot imagine Washington is not thinking the same. This is why it just seems to me that there's so much at stake here.
The Iranian regime is aware of the pressure that you've described that's on Trump. In fact, it's been discussed that Ghalibaf's posts on X are very sort of like sophisticated English, very market savvy, and it's actually thought that it's someone in the US, one of his former economic advisors who's in US, who's posting his tweets. So they understand the American system. They understand the midterm elections, the lame duck, and the pressures that are on Donald Trump. So they want to push Trump more towards the edge. And they're saving when you talked about, like, why don't they completely close down the Straits of Hormuz? So even if it's military possible, maybe it's a last resort option, which they don't want to exercise right now. It's the art of brinksmanship that I think they understand very well, and they've been playing for the last 47 years. And this is the same game all over again. We just got more experience in it.
I've always said, the Iranians invented chess, So from that point of view, like, there's no question that they are, like, they're masters of this kind of thing, right? I mean,
and also the roots of this regime is within the Iran's bazaar, the merchant guilds. It's often been told. I've often been told that if you go to an Iranian carpet shop and understand how they do business, how they sort of like, the haggling and the pressure and the psychological games that they play, it's equivalent to getting an MBA in an American university in business studies. So they understand the art of negotiation and the way they sort of like should play these games very well.
Destroying power plants and bridges are completely pointless unless what you're planning is the next step. And then it starts to make sense. And then, so the question is, is that what we're in for? Because again, I somehow don't see this conflict ending on a whimper. It's sort of, it seems to me that Trump has to take some risk right now. He has to gamble if he has any chance of winning, because if he stops now, he loses for sure. If he gambles, there's still some chance he might win. And then, any gambler will say, you know what, let's double down right now. Because otherwise it's always lost, no?
But the losses could be even bigger if you lose the gamble.
Well, that's it. Obviously, that goes without saying. But the question is, if they were to go after a particular region, to turn a region, which region would you consider, by the way?
I think the Kurdish region would be the top candidate. The Kurdish region, right from the beginning, perhaps was the one area of Iran where there was the most dissent, the most opposition to the new regime. Been historically against the Islamic Republic. and they're mostly Sunni as well. So they're not even Shias, they're not even ideologically aligned. And the Kurdish parties, I mean, you got 6 Kurdish parties. There's been a lot of infighting, but recently they went into a coalition. They've sort of like put aside their differences, and they've announced this coalition of the 6 Kurdish forces. And amongst the Iranian opposition, they are one of the ones who have a physical, or they can have a physical structure underground, because they've been going on for many years, and they have the sort of like the financial resources, and that they're being the best part. But even with that region, I think the limits of appeal will be to that ethnic part of Iran only. I don't think they would ever be able to appeal across Iran, across the entire population.
Will one faction decide to, essentially go to the US, for support against the other side? Let's just say, like a Jalidi, would they actually, if they feel really threatened by the IRGC, will they decide to ally with the US in order to bring down the IRGC? That's the question. Well, will they not go that far? Because going that far is like literally, you'll be committing treason.
I think civil war has always been a possibility in every one of these uprisings that's happened. And every time with each uprising, it becomes even more of a serious option. Um, and it's something that the Iranian people fear very much, because at the end of the day, no matter how much they oppose the regime, they don't want it to become a failed state like Libya, and they don't want it to become a Syria where there'd be like, years of civil war with many people getting killed and everything. But we're reaching a stage. Why I think it's getting more serious now is because the fiches is just getting wider and wider. I mean, you have this massive gulf now after the January massacre between the vast population of the Iranians that oppose the regime, who really can't forgive the regime for the brutal massacre that they carried out. I mean, even with their own brutal standards, this was unprecedented, what happened in January. And I don't think that the people can forgive the regime for that. So you got this massive gulf between the bulk of the population who are unarmed, but more in numbers against the regime. Then you got the different factions that are sort of like fighting over a smaller pot of what is left of Iran's economy. And then you've got these external factors as well. So everything is there for a civil war recipe. Sometimes I try not to think with my heart, but sometimes it's difficult. I don't think any Iranian wants to see a civil war and Iran becoming another Syria or something. But it's a real threat. It's a serious threat. I hope it doesn't happen. I really do.
Yeah, I agree. I hope it doesn't happen as well. So let's just I think in the end, the little people always get screwed. I mean, that's the reality. But
Unfortunately.
as and this is turning to a proxy war, and but let's hope for the best for the Iranian people at least. On that note, Potkin, it was incredible. Thank you so much for your time in explaining all these very complex issues to us. And I think, the next few days are going to be very, very crucial. And I think the discussion today hopefully will get us closer to actually getting to the heart of the matter before it happens. On that note,
Definitely.
thanks a lot. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Thank you.